If there is one person in Greenwood so deserving of this award, the lifetime of philanthropy, it would be Dr. Parham. He is a person who has provided services throughout his entire life here in Greenwood as a doctor, as a volunteer, and as a philanthropist. He is a great person. I love him for what he stands for. He is a person that loves God. He has a heart for people. He does not want anybody homeless, hungry, or disenfranchised. And not only that, he truly believes that every individual should be served with dignity and respect.
Dr. Parham is the most compassionate person I have ever met in my life. He cannot pass up an opportunity to help someone in need.
I don't remember the exact moment I met him. I do remember hearing his name long before I ever actually met him in person. I've lived in Greenwood for about 12 years, and pretty much right after I moved here, I'd hear his name connected with the Pathway House, I'd hear his name connected with hospice, with the food bank, with all these organizations in Greenwood.
Well, when I first met Dr. Parham, it was very interesting because I didn't realize I was meeting Dr. Parham. He actually delivered me on November 12th, 1967.
Hi, I first met Dr. Parham about 30 years ago, and he has always been a Christian role model for me. He's a person that has inspired me to become a better person.
In the 20 years that I had the great joy of being the pastor of First Baptist Greenwood, we had two large capital campaigns for building renovations. So in both of those capital campaigns, he was not only involved in leadership, but to nobody's surprise, gave one of the lead gifts. And because it was important for our leaders to know when certain gifts had been given, I knew that, but this is very much Jack. He would say, now I'm going to tell you what I'm going to give, but I don't want anybody else to know. So giving not for any kind of recognition, but because he loved First Baptist Church.
But we really started to get to know each other when I started working as a medical director for Hospice Care of the Piedmont. He was really the person who came up with the idea to bring hospice to Greenwood, and again, heard his name a lot as I started to work there. He was the very first medical director, was on the board for many years, and really is probably responsible for hospice and palliative care of the Piedmont being what it is today. Hospice just turned 40 this past year, and hospice was kind of a new movement at the time. So he started learning about hospice, visiting different hospice houses, actually went to England to visit one of the first hospice houses there to see how they did things. And it started out with Dr. Parham, a nurse in a room in the hospital, and grew to what it is today. He eventually raised money to build the hospice house, and again, it would not be what it is today without Dr. Parham.
One day I asked Jack, how do you know what to do and who to serve? And he said, Peter, in his very kind, gentle voice, he said, you need to slow down, you need to notice people, you need to serve people, and you need to love people where they are. And that's what he's done his whole life.
One thing about Dr. Parham, when he sets his mind to something, you better believe it's going to happen. He not only is a person that talks, but he is a person of action, and you will see it come into existence. And he is an awesome person to have on your team.
Dr. Parham actually purchased the very first mats that were used in the cold weather shelter back in 2010 for people to sleep on. Went all the way to Texas somehow to find those mats and bring them back here, and we still use those mats to this day at Pathway House.
The last time I was with Dr. Parham, this was probably last year at one of our volunteer banquets, he was sitting right next to me, and he said, my next project is a nursing home for homeless veterans. And I thought if anyone can make that happen, it's Jack Parham. So
whenever I've had an opportunity, I've tried to work alongside of him, whether it was Rotary Roots, the Pathway House, hospice, so I could learn from him. I knew every time wherever he was working, God was working there also.
You know, my tenure at First Baptist Greenwood, we had so many gifted leaders, but really none more significant than Dr. Jack Parham. He served on the diaconate several times. I think every time he was on the diaconate, his fellow deacons elected him as chair. But what really stands out in my mind is the transition team before I came. The person who leads the transition team needs to reflect our deepest values, loving God with all our hearts and loving our neighbors as ourselves. That person needs to be somebody whose judgment we have complete trust in. That person has to be somebody who has people skills. They're going to interview candidates. And that person has to be somebody with a deep love for the church, somebody the congregation is convinced is going to help the church move into the next chapter of its life. And that person for First Baptist Greenwood was Dr. Jack Parham.
The campus at Greenwood Pathway House is actually named after Dr. Parham and his wife Barbara because they were such an integral part of everything that's ever happened at Greenwood Pathway House.
Thank you, Dr. Parham, and I love you.
I cannot think of anyone better to receive the award. Again, we've named all the things that he's done over the years, and I think the example of how hospice started is probably a little bit of how the other one started. He saw a problem, he saw that we could do better, and he made it happen. There's a lot of people who are dreamers, who have a dream or a vision, but he seems to be able to have a vision, be able to rally people together for that vision and actually make it happen. I think someone who can do all of those things is pretty rare and uses their influence to help other people. So I can't think of anyone better to receive the award than him.
We love you, Jack. Thanks for being such a great inspiration.